Hello. Thanks for tuning in. This is Dr. B. Let's get to it.
Chapter 10. Swiggin' and Swallowin', Alcohol and Drugs. Researchers have discovered that chocolate produces some of the same reactions in the brain as marijuana. The researchers also discovered other similarities between the two, but can't remember what they are. Matt Lauer, The Today Show. The new sentry was at his post and on guard for the first time. He had been given orders not to admit any car unless it had a special identification. The very first unmarked car that the sentry stopped contained a general. The young man politely asked for identification. The general said, "Don't you know who I am?" and then told his driver to drive on through. He was obviously irritated with the soldier. The young sentry then politely asked the general, "I'm new at this, sir. Who do I shoot first, you or the driver?" There are times when firmness and determination are needed in spite of feeling intimidated. This attitude is nowhere more needed than when facing the specter of alcohol and other drugs, along with the threats that they pose to our children. We live in a pill-popping, booze-guzzling, quick-relief society. When this fact is combined with the high levels of stress that most people experience, we have a very dangerous combination. Stress seeks relief and sometimes finds drugs and alcohol. One problem becomes two. Children have access to prohibited substances in their neighborhoods, in their schools, and sometimes at home. There is no end to the avenues that a child can travel down to acquire and use drugs or alcohol. It is the rare child indeed who can make it through school without being approached and prompted to buy, sell, or use alcohol and other drugs. For teenagers, celebrations as well as grieving losses are often built around them. Curiosity, desiring the forbidden fruit, rebelliousness, and peer influence combines in a powerful mix. Teenagers will often succumb to these pressures to experiment. Due to their mental, moral, and emotional immaturity, they are at high risk for psychological addiction. However, what is even more worrisome is the risk of physical addiction due to the vulnerability of the changing adolescent body. A teenager's body is undergoing dramatic hormonally prompted changes. Due to the body being physically unstable, adolescents can become addicted to alcohol in a matter of months, as compared with an adult who would usually take years. Damage to a developing mind and body can also be retarding to a child emotionally, locking them into the time that they began using drugs. Later, they usually appear much younger than their chronological age. They just don't seem to grow up. Younger kids. While younger children are not as apt to be using drugs as teenagers, kids are using them earlier and earlier. According to TalkingWithKids.org, national studies show that the average age when a child first experiments with alcohol is 11. The average age of trying marijuana is 12. Government agencies provide similar statistics. However, children can develop a curiosity for drugs and alcohol even earlier. Young children are often confused about what these devilish chemicals are, what they can do, and what dangers there might be. Confusion concerning drugs can be fed by a tendency of many adults to run to the family doctor whenever they feel stressed or ill. Adults return with yet another vial of pills. Frequent trots down to the local drugstore to buy a box of over-the-counter cough, flu, headache, stomach, and hemorrhoid medicine doesn't go unnoticed by a child either. Children can have difficulty separating the legitimate use of medication from the illegal use of drugs. To help a child understand, age-appropriate information needs to be shared. The difference between legally prescribed medicine that is there to help should be contrasted with illegal drugs that will hurt. An emphasis on having a healthy body and how illegal drugs or alcohol use will hurt them needs to be made. Explaining that drugs and alcohol will make them feel bad, hurt their brain, and cause them to feel strange is in order. Drugs hurt their performance in school and on the playing field. Focus on the fact that children who use alcohol and drugs make people unhappy. They hurt themselves as well as others. Opportunities for teaching should not be lost when ads come on the television through the latest anti-drug campaign. Watching a program on television that involves characters using alcohol or other drugs provides teaching opportunities to separate the good from the bad. A child can be asked what they think is happening in a show and what the drugs or alcohol might do to a person. The parent can add to the experience by describing hidden dangers and why they should stay away from drugs. As children get older, they can be given more specific information regarding the dangers of drug use. This counsel can include the physical damage, emotional pain, and how using drugs and alcohol will hurt their dreams for the future. Trouble with the law should not be overlooked as a possible consequence. Approximately 80% of the people in jails and prisons are there on drug-related offenses. Children should be encouraged to make good choices and practice how to make them. However, for them to learn, we, their parents, must teach. What we teach comes through what is said and always through what is done. Education is vital for helping children because so many drugs are out there waiting for an opportunity to spread their lies and spring their traps. Types of drugs. There is a long list of potential snakes in the grass. They lie there waiting for an opportunity to bite our children and infect them with the consequences of using them. Alcohol remains the most commonly used and experimented with drug. It is generally easy to find, and society has placed its seal of approval on it. Parents need to keep in mind that alcohol is a drug. Its social acceptability is noticed in the way we refer to it in the addiction literature. Separately, we say drugs and alcohol as if it is special and not as dangerous. Alcohol impairs judgment and coordination. It decreases inhibitions and, like all other drugs, has the potential for creating problems in every area of life. This includes a person's health and relationships. Left unregulated, it can eventually destroy a person. The adult that drinks moderately isn't of concern. The adult that drinks excessively, or the child that drinks at all, that is another matter. Children often see alcohol used to celebrate special occasions. However, they also see adults use alcohol to comfort emotional pain or combat stress. Some children witness drunkenness, violence, and other irresponsible acts that can accompany excessive use. While alcohol is arguably the most popular drug, alcohol isn't alone. The next most commonly used substance is marijuana. Most teenagers will report having tried both marijuana and alcohol by the time they are halfway through their high school experience. The effect of long-term use of marijuana is the removal of motivation and the dulling of thought processes. In other words, it makes people lazy and stupid. However, the myth that marijuana is harmless has continued to be perpetuated, especially among teenagers. Some people would argue through society in general. The truth of the matter is that the pot smoked by the 60s generation is not the marijuana or weed smoked by those in the 21st century. Cannabis has been carefully cultivated, and we are now dealing with hybrids that are many times the strength of the marijuana in the 1960s. Some pot has been reported to have hallucinatory qualities. Addiction potential has increased proportionally to the potency. Other risks like lung cancer are often overlooked. There are also two common stimulants that teenagers tend to experiment with. The first is cocaine, which provides a rush to a high that often results in a crash and paranoia. Crack is a form of cocaine and a common street drug. Normal cocaine can be rather expensive. Crack cocaine is cooked into a brownish crystal-like form, sold and smoked cheaply. Low cost invites the poor and unwary to give it a try. One of the features that makes crack so dangerous is that by smoking it, the user experiences a very quick high that lasts for just a short while. The high is then followed by a crash. Due to this quick high followed by the low, someone using crack will return to the drug just as a chain smoker will return to a pack of cigarettes, using over and over again. Many crack addicts report that they became addicted to crack the first time they used it. Another unpleasant quality of crack cocaine is that it is one of the few drugs that tend to disengage the maternal tendency of a mother. This occurs even while she is pregnant. Normal instincts to protect an unborn child shut down. It is very common for a woman to continue use in spite of the fact that she is carrying a baby. Another stimulant, a synthetic form of speed, has also found wide popularity. This is methamphetamine, often referred to as crank or ice. Like other stimulants, it has the effect of revving up the body, producing a high and then a crash. Dangers with stimulants range from strokes to heart attacks. A bad joke in the drug community is that you never see an old speed freak. None are left alive. Another class of commonly used drugs is that of psychedelics. These tend to be drugs that provide a feeling of euphoria, but also distort reality and provoke hallucinations. Inhalants are a favorite category of drug among the young. They are cheap, readily available, and easy to use. Using inhalants is often referred to as huffing. Huffing can be done with a variety of chemicals. Everything from paint, glue, and Vaseline to various fumes from spray cans can be inhaled. Fumes can be inhaled by coating a cloth or by leaning over a container. Some kids constantly carry a chemically soaked cloth for easy inhales. Once taken into the body, these chemicals kill brain cells, a lot of brain cells. They do an incredible amount of damage quickly. The killing of brain cells gives a spacey, mood-altering sensation. This is the high. Unfortunately, huffing kills so many brain cells that mental deterioration can be charted through prolonged use. Another danger, like so many other drugs, is that using inhalants can be fatal. Unfortunately, paints, common household chemicals, and gasoline are not thought of in terms of being drugs, but they can be used as such. So often appropriate precautions to store them properly aren't taken. Most of the time little attention is paid to their abuse potential. Other drugs are more obvious. One such drug is ecstasy. A recent phenomenon has been the surge in popularity of the drug ecstasy. It is frequently seen at parties and is used to create euphoria. Ecstasy is often referred to as a club drug. It is very popular at parties and nightclubs. Ecstasy can bring about very unfortunate side effects. A lasting effect of this drug on the mind is common, creating emotional trauma and mental confusion. Schizophrenic-like side effects have been seen. Another psychedelic, which has been around for much longer, is LSD. It was popular in the drug culture of the 60s and 70s, but has found a renewed interest. LSD has seen a new following. Its use seemed to have died off, but this mind-bender has resurfaced with renewed popularity. The drug has not lost its power to convince its user that they can fly, only to discover that they only fall. Bad trips remain a constant threat. PCP is yet another psychedelic, also known as angel dust. It is commonly sprinkled on cigarettes or marijuana and smoked. Brain damage is often the price that the user pays. Date rape drugs are also out there and can easily be put in drinks or given in other forms to unsuspecting victims. These include GHB, ketamine, and rohypnol, more club drugs. However, not all wolves appear as wolves. Some come in sheep's clothing. Legal medications can be used illegally. Prescription drugs are all too easy to find and abuse. Kids often know more about our medicine cabinets than we do. They may experiment with what is lying around the house, or they can buy it from friends whose parents have gotten it from legitimate sources. The potential for addiction to prescription medications is just as great as it is to illegal substances. But because medications have legitimate uses and come from bona fide doctors, their dangers can be easily overlooked. Another possibility is using painkillers for injury, and this leading into addiction. Caution should be taken. These examples of drugs, while common, only scratch the surface of mind-altering chemicals available to our young. Their effects can go to the extremes of causing brain damage and even death. However, there is also the likelihood of heartache for users and family alike. To be able to avoid drug problems and their consequences requires knowledge. Knowledge of how to recognize when a child is using drugs is critical. Signs and symptoms. When dealing with the possibility of drug use, parents need to look for what is outside of the ordinary. Children have patterns of behavior, appearance, mood, and friends. These are the tendencies parents come to expect from one day to the next. Investigation includes looking at a child's behavior, social activities, their physical appearance, emotions, and how they dress. The aim is to notice any changes in these areas. Focusing on the physical, the most obvious signs of use are related to coordination. This involves not only how a child carries themselves, but also the eyes and speech. It has been said that the eyes are the windows of the soul. The eyes will display evidence of drug use. Bloodshot eyes, eyes appearing yellow or jaundiced. Wildly dilated pupils or difficulty focusing can be indications of abuse. Coordination oddities, like being clumsy or uncoordinated, or the opposite, appearing very rigid or exhibiting sharp movements, can be telltale signs. This phenomenon often occurs from a child overcompensating for the effects of alcohol or other drugs. Also, speech can be slurred, or at times, even garbled. The pace of speaking can be very rapid or very slow. Stimulants speed up, while depressants slow down. Coordination problems, changes in the eyes, and speech can be especially noticeable during or shortly after an episode of drug use. Other physical signs can include chronic eye redness, sore throat or dry cough, and looking unhealthy. A child's appearance may change by the way they dress or their grooming. This change can travel in two directions. One way is being sloppy and seeming not to care about how they look. The other route is dressing in a way that identifies them with the drug culture or an unhealthy group. This change includes wearing dark clothes or donning T-shirts with drug and alcohol symbols and slogans. Emotionally, irritability is common for those using drugs. Hostility and anger can be seen as well as wide mood swings. Negative emotions go beyond what's normally expected from a child. These are common results of drug after effects and fear of getting caught. Users become defensive, on guard, or even paranoid. This anger can become abusive by lashing out at or threatening others. Another common change includes losing interest in favorite activities, that is, sports and hobbies. Feeling chronically tired is also usual. Loss of motivation and self-discipline, low energy, forgetfulness, difficulty concentrating, and short attention are other signs of use. Uncaring attitudes, changes in friends, and being evasive about new friends can all be further alcohol and drug use signs. Identification with certain rock groups, slogans, and drugs may be noticed. Major changes in sleeping patterns are usually experienced. School problems, including absenteeism, tardiness, and poor grades, are par for the course. Family tensions and arguments tend to increase, especially when the child is around. A child who is using becomes more secretive, defensive, and resentful of questions as time goes on. Eating patterns can change. In some instances, parents will notice that a child is exhibiting an unusually large appetite. This appetite increase is commonly known as the munchies. Excessive hunger is an after effect of marijuana use. At other times, a lack of appetites may be witnessed. Cocaine, methamphetamine, and other stimulants cause a lack of appetite as a side effect. A child who is using will do their best to deny or otherwise avoid being caught. Cover-ups should be recognized as possible attempts to disguise signs of drug and alcohol abuse. Notice bottles of Visine or other eye treatments that can be an attempt to cover up the eye evidence. Eye treatments may be used for dryness brought about by drug use or to remove telltale color. Furthermore, there is the use of room deodorizers and incense. This cover-up is particularly common in the use of smoking drugs. Excessive cologne, perfume, and breath mints can also be attempted to disguise smells. Windows may be found open when the temperature is boiling or freezing outside. Besides, strange doors, butts, odd-looking leaves, or seeds may be found in bags or pockets. These factors are often associated with marijuana use. Other bags, small boxes or containers with odd substances or pills, as well as pipes and rolling paper or unusual items can indicate drug involvement. Alcohol containers are an obvious indication of use. Logically, the more signs that correspond to possible drug and alcohol use, the more likely there is a real problem. The wise parent pays attention to signs and changes that are occurring in their children. Fighting back. Knowledge is power. In order to fight the threat that drugs pose to our children, it is important to know the enemy. The signs and symptoms are the first step. Educating ourselves about resources is the second. The average parent feels blindsided by the possibility of their child using drugs. Resources are very helpful and often free. Sources of drug and alcohol information for parents include the National Institute for Mental Health, the National Child Safety Council, the National Clearinghouse for Alcohol and Drug Information, and the Partnership for a Drug-Free America. A caution. Knowing the warning signs of drug and alcohol abuse is imperative, but these signs are not absolutely reliable. Many of these symptoms will grow gradually, but when they occur quickly, they are particularly suspicious. Due to some of the symptoms of drug abuse being like those of depression, as well as normal teenage adjustments, parents need to be careful not to jump to premature conclusions. Physical and emotional problems can produce some of the same symptoms as drug and alcohol abuse. Other possible causes of these symptoms should be ruled out. However, if you are seeing many symptoms and a lot of irrational or unexplained behavior, it is time to take further steps. The first step is to talk with your child. Taking control. Don't fall into the trap of feeling that you are a failure as a parent if you suspect or confirm that your child is using alcohol or other drugs. A child's mistakes shouldn't be assumed to be the direct result of bad parenting. Children are under a lot of influences and pressures. There are many reasons for them experimenting with drugs. Blaming yourself will only keep you hurting emotionally, and the guilt may prevent you from taking the action that's needed to protect your child. If you face the problem promptly, the situation can usually be dealt with and your child will be protected. Keep in mind that there are many inadequate parents whose children grow up to never use drugs, and there are many model parents whose children do use drugs. In fact, it is possible to do all the right things, that is, talking with children, taking precautions, and disciplining, and still have a child who experiments with drugs. Healthy parenting greatly decreases the chances of a child getting into serious trouble, but it doesn't guarantee it. The good news is that parents are not helpless, nor are they alone, even when danger shows itself. Once there are strong suspicions of drug or alcohol abuse, it is time to have a family meeting. The overriding attitude of the parents needs to be one of love and concern, balanced with firmness and a no tolerance of drugs attitude. A frank discussion needs to ensue about concerns and the dangers of drug use, as well as how parents will respond to their child using alcohol or other drugs. However, parents need to be careful not to take a blaming or attacking approach. A child will be defensive enough. It makes no sense to provoke more. Choose the timing, try to be as calm as possible, and point out specific concerns. Point out what has been noticed which created the suspicions or knowledge of drug involvement. Give a child an opportunity to explain. Parents mustn't do all the talking. However, this doesn't mean that parents should automatically buy all of their child's explanations or allow their child to control the discussion. Do some listening. Listen, because you could have a misperception of the situation. On the other hand, be prepared for defensiveness and denial if they are using drugs. Defensiveness is to be expected with drug users, especially teenagers. That is why calmly sticking to the facts is so helpful. Facts are more difficult to argue with than assumptions. When someone offers illogical arguments against facts, it's a sign of trying to cover up. Parents, be sure to share your values and why drugs concern you so much. It is important to establish a no-tolerance attitude about drugs and alcohol use. This intolerance needs to be communicated clearly to children. When confronting suspicions or knowledge of drug use, notice if a child seems evasive or if their explanations are not convincing. An evasive attitude is usually indicating there is something to hide. When other factors could explain a child's recent attitudes and behavior, a parent can visit their family doctor to rule out any physical illnesses. A mental health professional could be consulted to look into the possibility of emotional problems. There is also the option of drug testing. This form of checking for problems is particularly important if a child is belligerent or non-responsive to parental confrontation. Immediate action needs to be taken when a child is violently reacting or otherwise uncooperative with parents. In those instances, a child should be considered dirty until proven that they are clean. Drug testing can be particularly important and helpful. Under normal circumstances, a refusal to cooperate by a child usually means that they are using. A drug screen that is done and comes back positive for use is hard to argue with. In these instances, further action is necessary. Follow-up needs to include evaluation by a professional and involvement in an intervention program. Treatment should include support for both the family and the user. Help can range from self-help groups to outpatient treatment, day treatment, residential programs, hospitalization, and detox. Which is best depends on the type and severity of the problem. Family involvement is crucial. Parents should never give in to a child promising that they will never do it again. Once involved with drugs, the temptation to use again remains strong. Steps need to be taken to ensure protection. For most kids, the pull of drugs and peer pressure are just too powerful to handle alone. Intervention. The best intervention is prevention. Before a child has a drug problem, they need to be educated about the dangers and risks of drug and alcohol abuse. A negative spin should be placed on drug use, explaining the concern of how it can disrupt or even ruin their lives. Explanations need to be given early. They should be given before a child becomes aware of people using drugs. Explain how drugs promise pleasure but result in pain. Teach kids to deal with peer pressure. Peer pressure is one of the realities that children have to live with. Peer pressure can be either good or bad. At times it can be used to motivate a child to be responsible and maintain their obligation to a group or team. However, it can also work in the negative direction, creating pressure to use drugs, drink alcohol, or lay out of school. Children need adequate confidence and to feel supported by their family to be able to stand up to negative peer pressures. Families need to build a child's confidence and self-esteem. They should encourage good decision-making. Parents need to show children how to make good decisions. Role-playing can be very helpful. This rehearsal can be done between the parents and the child. Rehearsing situations that can happen, like others approaching them about cigarettes, drugs, and alcohol, can be helpful. Kids can practice skills such as giving a reason that they can't use. No, because it's not good for me, or no, because I'll get into trouble. Children can also use a change of subject, throwing in an activity or place that they need to be. No, I have to get to the ballpark for practice. Kids also need to be taught that they can just say no and walk away. No is the one common and necessary response when being encouraged to get or use drugs. It needs to be explained to children that if peers make fun of them for this, it is their friends that really have the problem, and it's time to find new friends. When practicing how to respond to being approached, don't come up with strange, complicated scenarios. Keep the situations very simple, with short, deliberate responses. This needs to include what to say and what to do. It should also be recognized that the way a child says what they say is important. They need to say it strongly, definitively, and firmly. No must sound like it means no. If pressure persists, they need to say it even more strongly and firmly and be ready to walk away. Children can also be taught to avoid certain people in certain situations. They need not put themselves in places where they are likely to be pressured or tempted to use drugs. Children need to stay away from places and people that tend to be associated with drugs and alcohol. They must be encouraged to have positive activities and friends that are not associated with alcohol and other drugs. Parents need to exercise positive influence to counteract negative peer pressure and to teach children how to live. For parents, As parents, we remain the primary examples for our children. Therefore, we have a responsibility to provide positive influence. Parents should encourage creative social activities without alcohol and other drugs. They should not allow or serve alcohol to minors or allow them to bring alcohol or drugs into their home. Parties that children attend should be well supervised with a limited number of guests and restricted to areas that can be monitored. Parents should set a reasonable example and be sure to communicate clearly their position on alcohol and drugs. There should be no tolerance for a child using drugs or alcohol. Setting an example includes not leaving alcohol out and easily seen as not pressuring others to drink. Alcohol and other drugs should not be a focal point of get-togethers. Remember, children listen far more to what we do than what we tell them. Adults don't need to and shouldn't drink frequently, whether alone or with others. It sets a poor example to announce that an adult needs a drink after a hard day. A parent who drinks excessively or uses illegal drugs just encourages their child to do the same. Also, parents shouldn't encourage or reward teenagers with alcohol on birthdays or special occasions. A researcher, Hebison, noted the importance of parents and stated, looking specifically at adolescent drug use, positive family relationships, involvements, and attachments appear to discourage youth initiation into drug use. A strong relationship and personal involvement dramatically cuts down the chances of drug and alcohol problems. While parents can be the best drug preventative, there are many factors that place children at risk for abusing drugs and alcohol. Risk factors. There are no 100% guarantees of what will prevent or cause drug use, let alone predict it. However, there are risk factors that are highly associated with drug and alcohol problems. Federal, state, and local agencies pay a lot of attention to these factors because of the problems that go along with them. Children with high risk factors place a great deal of stress on social and legal systems. These are factors for parents to pay attention to as well. According to Professor David Hawkins, a child is more likely to become a drug abuser if 1. They grow up in a family with unclear expectations for their behavior. 2. Parents are uninvolved and give little supervision. 3. There is excessive or inconsistent discipline. 4. They have parents who use tobacco, alcohol, or other drugs. 5. They are encouraged to participate in the ritual of drug and alcohol use, like bringing drinks to parents or getting and lighting cigarettes. 6. They are aggressive and hyperactive in early school years, have poor grades and test scores, or fail later in elementary school. 7. There is a family history of alcoholism or other drug use. 8. They feel little connection to their family, community, or school. 9. They display a positive attitude towards drug use. 10. They live in a community where drug use is widely accepted. 11. They move frequently. And 12. They grow up in extreme poverty. Wise parents will take steps to eliminate or minimize these risk factors. These factors increase the chances of problems, but even without them, the risk of drug use exists. Keep in mind that many parents have difficulty believing that their child will use alcohol or other drugs. Parents are frightened by the possibility and often choose to believe that their child wouldn't lie to them about taking drugs. The twist is that all kids deceive sometimes. The reality is that drug-abusing children lie. Drug use results in health problems, school difficulties, sexually transmitted diseases, teen pregnancies, crime, suicides, and deaths. The dark cloud of drugs can easily blot out a bright future. Detecting the presence of drugs can save a child. Testing can be done scientifically with the aim of identifying the source of problems. Steps can be taken to correct them. Drug testing. Unfortunately, there are times when a child is exhibiting too many signs and symptoms of drug or alcohol use to ignore. There are also moments when a child is belligerent when confronted with a parent's concerns. It is at these times that the need for drug testing presents itself. A child who is using drugs generally has no hesitation to lie and say that they are not. This behavior leaves parents in a quandary because they see what appears to be evidence of drug use, but struggle with wanting to believe that their child is telling them the truth. The only way to resolve this puzzle is with drug testing. There are 4 primary means of testing that are currently available. These include saliva tests, urine tests, and hair testing. Because of the extreme nature and limited use of blood testing, it will not be addressed here. Various drugs have different half-lives. In other words, substances will stay in a person's system and be able to be detected for different periods of time. Alcohol, for example, will remain detectable for a very short time. An attempt at detection must be made in less than 24 hours. This is one of the reasons why it can be difficult to determine alcohol use. This is unless a teenager has been caught in the act of drinking. Bottles have been found. They are seen staggering, have slurred speech, or been stopped for a DUI. Due to the nature of alcohol, the way it is consumed, and its short half-life, alcohol screening saliva tests are appropriate. Such tests need only take moments and are performed by placing a litmus-like tab on the tongue and then getting a color reading after the saliva has been absorbed. Usually the reading is done by a color code and indicates the presence or level of alcohol. One company that offers alcohol swabs for purchase is www.onsitedrugtesting.com, and the cost is minimal. Breathalyzers to detect alcohol presence are also possibilities, but the cost usually restricts them to police, probation, and treatment program use. Fortunately, the detection of other drugs is not as restricted as alcohol use. The presence of other drugs is subject to urinalysis. The most common form of drug screen is a urine-based test. This method can be obtained through the internet by going to local businesses offering drug screens, or can be done by the family physician. Other organizations also exist that will send a test to be done at home for a modest expense. There are advantages and disadvantages to each urine-based approach. Going to a family physician, who the parents or child is comfortable with and knows, can add a sense of ease for the teenager or parents. This comfort makes the process of testing go more smoothly. However, attitudes can work in the other direction. There can be concerns about reputation if a drug test comes back positive. Some families are uncomfortable going back to their doctor once a drug problem is known. Family doctors are wonderful resources, but obtaining drug testing materials via the internet or through private drug testing companies is more comfortable for some families. When samples must be sent to a testing company, they are typically number-coded rather than labeled with a person's name. The results are then shipped confidentially to the purchaser. When testing and reading is done at home, there is no need for any identification whatsoever, which provides even more privacy. Due to the advances in science, most testing kits and procedures are highly accurate. However, it is always best to review the information for any form of testing kit. Parents should be comfortable with the procedure and accuracy level. One means of verifying accuracy is to check whether the test is used by businesses, criminal justice systems, in rehabilitation centers, or by hospitals and physicians. These organizations must maintain the use of highly accurate techniques so they can serve as a guide for those unfamiliar with drug testing. One example of such a test is the rapid drug screen. When approaching testing, it is best to have an idea of what you are testing for. There are general tests that will screen a wide variety of substances or their residue. There are tests that will be very specific and test for one particular chemical or byproduct. This requires detective work prior to performing the drug test. Looking at the signs and symptoms that prompted the need of the drug test can be helpful in determining what might be appropriate. For example, a teenager who is smoking marijuana may have left seeds in baggies or left cigarette rolling paper around. There may be a sweet smell that is noticed by parents emanating from a bedroom or basement. A parent may notice times when their teenager secludes themselves in their bedroom or another room in the house for long periods of time and then appears ravenous, wanting to eat, and experiences what is known as the munchies. These signs would indicate the need to screen for THC, the active ingredient in marijuana. For a child who is using alcohol, there can be the smell on the breath or clothing, bloodshot eyes, slurred speech, or staggering. For a child who is using stimulants, such as cocaine or crank, they may appear hyperactive with pressured speech and have a poor appetite. Know what you are looking for, otherwise use a very broad test that will pick up on all the common drugs. Many times it is difficult for a parent to know what drugs may be being used. There will also be times when a child will be using more than one drug. Parents may see many of the general signs of use and believe something is happening, but don't know exactly what. In those cases, it is best to do a wide drug screening and cover the areas of cocaine, opiates, marijuana, amphetamines, and possibly even substances like PCP. We need to keep in mind that drug testing may be the only solution to discovering the truth. However, testing must be done in a timely fashion. Urine testing is not as time-limited as a litmus test for alcohol detection. However, there are still time limits for other drugs and their byproducts to remain in a person's system. Most stay less than a week. Marijuana is the most common exception. The sooner testing is done when drug use is suspected, the better. When considering a home-administered drug test, look how easy it is to use. It warrants repeating that a child who outright refuses to be drug tested should be considered dirty, and appropriate steps should be taken to give consequences, and they should be taken to a treatment professional. When there is violence or other high levels of opposition, the police may need to be involved. An alternative to urine assessment is hair testing. This is a form of assessment that is becoming more common, but many people are unfamiliar with it. Hair holds various chemicals, vitamins, and minerals that have been consumed by the body for a long period of time. Hair analysis avoids the short windows of drug testing opportunity faced by other assessment techniques. It can also be used to detect a wide variety of drugs. Many drugs can be in and out of the system within just a few days or within a couple of weeks. Even marijuana, which is generally considered to stay in the system longer than other drugs due to tying into fatty tissue, only remains detectable for approximately 30 days by urine testing. Hair testing companies maintain that they can detect the presence of such drugs as marijuana, cocaine, opiates, methamphetamines, ecstasy, and even PCP for up to 90 days after they have been used. The testing process involves collecting strands of hair from a child and then sending that sample to a testing facility. The results are typically mailed back within a couple of weeks. Once again, the normal process is to use identification by coded numbers to ensure confidentiality. No names are typically used so that privacy is maintained. One such test is the PDT-90 and can be seen at drugfreeteenagers.com. Once drug testing has occurred, there are two obvious results. The first is that a child is clean. There is no evidence of drug use from the screen. However, even with a negative result, there may still be concerns about attitudes or behaviors that prompted suspicion of drug or alcohol use. In this case, the child should be spoken to about the drug screen being clean and that the parent is pleased that it was negative. The possibility of drug use has been ruled out as a current problem. However, those attitudes and behaviors that were noticed can represent behavioral or emotional problems. When this is the case, these concerns should be pursued. The aid of a mental health professional is useful to determine what the true causes of attitudes and behaviors are. They can also help with the correction. The second possible result of drug testing is that a child will test positive for drugs. In this case, several things need to occur. One is a very frank and firm discussion with the child regarding the findings. This talk should not involve blaming or demeaning the child, but should come from a position of concern and caring. The message must be sent that it is a serious situation, and the parents are going to take whatever steps are necessary in order to protect their child. A room search, car search, as well as a search of areas that the child frequents where drugs or drug paraphernalia could be stashed should be done. Be sure to examine hollow bedposts, panels, and drop ceilings, and in any cubbyhole that could be used to hide things. A child may complain that their privacy is being violated. However, in this instance, the need for safety overrides privacy. It should also be pointed out to the child that this is a legal issue as well as a moral and trust matter. When drugs are in the house, the family is at risk, as well as the child. If the child does not cooperate, the next step would be to get the police involved. It can be explained that the family would much rather handle the problem if they will cooperate. Treatment is preferred to having to deal with the law and possibly going to jail. This reality check can sometimes motivate a child to be cooperative, especially when their response to room searches and confrontation is hostility. The next step in dealing with a positive drug screen is to evaluate the quality of the friends that kids are spending time with. The places that they tend to go need to be looked at as well. Usually, this translates into restricting who friends can be and places that a child can go. The idea is to limit negative influences and opportunities to get and use drugs. The end result is temporarily limiting freedom. However, there is always the possibility of an adolescent going behind their parents' backs and finding a way of doing some of what they are not supposed to do. However, this doesn't mean that a parent can't exert control. Remember, parents still control such areas as transportation, electricity, and money for even a teenager. Managing these areas can act as leverage to motivate a child to do the right thing. Keep in mind that a parent can seek the guidance of a professional who is familiar with the treatment of alcohol and drug problems with teenagers. Dealing with a drug or alcohol problem can be overwhelming for a parent. It is not something that they are used to dealing with. To have someone in their corner who is not involved emotionally, can be objective, and has experience in these matters can be quite helpful. There are also times when such a person can be more influential with a teenager than a family member can be. An adolescent may listen more to an outsider than a parent about drugs and alcohol. Now for the bad news. Given all that has been said about detection, there comes the truth that it is possible to cheat on drug tests. Yes, it's like having a cheat sheet for a history exam. This is especially true with urine analysis. A teenager merely needs to get on the internet or talk to some druggy friends to get instructions on what to drink to dilute or pass through their bodies the remnants of drug use. There are, in fact, even books that can be purchased at local bookstores or over the internet that will describe in detail how to fool drug screens. These remedies range from common juices and odd concoctions to herbal teas and other agents to dilute, cover, or flush out of the system evidence of drug use. Because of possibly cheating, testing is best done without giving prior notice. Unfortunately, rebellion, paranoia, and deceit are all part of the drug package, a magnification of normal adolescent attitudes. These factors can continue even after drug testing and well clean. This used to be referred to as the dry drunk. A person no longer uses, but they are nearly as unpleasant to be around as when they were using. This is one more reason that treatment can help. Conclusion. Alcohol and other drugs are common and very visible aspects of our society. Our children miss nothing. Adults drink to celebrate, drink to mourn, and drink on holidays and birthdays. Alcohol is a frequent guest in many homes. It is so prevalent that it is the easiest drug for children to get their hands on. Drugs have become a mainstay of society. One only need to look in their medicine cabinet or kitchen drawer and count the prescription bottles to be reminded of how frequently prescription drugs are used. Most parents find street drugs more frightening. Street drugs include new synthetics, as well as those chemicals that have been well known for ages, such as derivatives of cocaine and heroin. The second most common drug, marijuana, has also been around a long time, but has maintained the illusion that it is harmless. Many people still seek its legalization. Unfortunately, the pot that is being used now is not the same as what was used in the 1960s. Growers have crossbred it to the point where the new hybrids are significantly more potent, even to the point of altering perceptions. They have used the same techniques that legitimate farmers employed to improve legitimate crops. Many other illegal substances are readily available. LSD is on the rise, crack is inexpensive, and ecstasy and date rape drugs are all the rage. Alcohol, prescription drugs, and street drugs are constantly in the faces of our teenagers. All can be acquired and abused. The average child has tried alcohol by the age of 11 and marijuana by the age of 12. Drug use is a tremendous threat to our children, their futures, and the family. The cost in failed lives and finances is incalculable. Zero tolerance needs to be the standard in the family. No drug use should be accepted. The best defense that families have is to be close and to spend time with one another. Families need to be able to talk together, deal with stress, and support each other. Strong and healthy parent-child relationships are a fundamental hedge of protection against a child getting involved in alcohol and drugs. However, because peer pressure, stress, and the abundance of drugs and alcohol still represent a threat, a child, even in the best of families, can become involved with alcohol and other drugs. However, when bad things happen to good families, that healthy relationship between parent and child allows for healing. What is important to remember is not to become the proverbial ostrich that sticks its head in the sand. At times, drug testing is necessary. Problems need to be recognized for what they are, and then appropriate action needs to be taken to protect our children. The battle with drugs and alcohol is not one parents can afford to lose.